Welcome to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie. After learning a ton about kidney stones and helping people prevent stones at the University of Chicago, I was fed up with all the terrible advice people were finding online. So I decided to do something about it. The Kidney Dietitian was born. This podcast is for people who want to learn what actually works to prevent kidney stones and still enjoy life, eating, and their favorite foods. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the 69th episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts, and today we have another wonderful questioner from a listener. So let's go ahead and listen.
Hi, Melanie. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you. I am so happy to have found you. Your information has been life-changing. I've been a kidney stone sufferer for 13 years, and my urologist gave me the typical generic advice, and in a lot of ways led me to believe that there wasn't much that I could do because I'm just a kidney stone former. But as I said, your information has been life-changing. One of the questions I do want to ask is what your opinion is on a supplement called TheraLith. It's a vitamin supplement that includes vitamin B6, magnesium, and potassium. I've been taking it for about 10 years. I always considered, even if it's not helping me, it's not hurting me, and I might as well take it in the off chance it's doing something. But now I'm not so sure if it's even worth taking, especially if it's not helping me.
So thank you, Jill, so much for that wonderful question and also for your kind words. It makes my day whenever I hear that people feel that there's hope, because if I do nothing else, I just want to give people hope, because I know that unfortunately the message that so many people get from their doctors and healthcare team in general is that, well, you're just a stone former, like try to drink more water, but good luck. And as you know, there is so much more that we can do. And a lot of that just stems from honestly a complete, just lack of education around doctors and for what we can do to actually prevent stones. But kidney stones are preventable, and I'm so happy that you found me. So thank you for your kind words. That made my day. So I thought I would dive into the specific supplement that you asked about. I get a lot of questions about specific supplements for stone formers or stone breakers, right? Because there's so many out there. I will say that generally the research behind all of these is pretty sparse. Generally, supplements for that claim to be good for stones tend to be some combination of citrate. A lot of them have some sort of citrate alkali. A lot of them have the nutrients that we're going to talk about in TheraLith, which are vitamin B6, magnesium, and potassium. A lot of times they'll have like calcium citrate, but generally there's some sort of dose of alkali, which may or may not be a good thing for you, which we'll talk a little bit more as we dive into the specifics of TheraLith. But I wanted to kind of give that general disclaimer that in general, the research behind supplements, especially as sort of this generic, hey, everyone with stones should be taking it, is pretty sparse. So when we look at this TheraLith, I'm assuming that's how you say it, supplement specifically, it essentially just has three things in it. So there is a very large dose of vitamin B6. If you look at the supplement facts on the back of that bottle, it says that it has 441% of the amount of vitamin B6 that we need each day. It also has 43% of the RDA, or again, that recommended daily intake of magnesium, and 2% of potassium. So when we look at each of these things individually, there's always like a little bit of truth, right? Like these things are there for a reason. There's a justification for putting these things in a kidney stone supplement. So when we look at vitamin B6 is brought up quite a bit when it comes to stone prevention because it is necessary in the pathway for your liver to make oxalate, if that makes sense. So you know how I talk a lot about how your liver can make oxalate from a wide variety of things, and your liver, basically, if you don't have vitamin B6, potentially your liver could be more likely to make oxalate, essentially. I'll try to simplify it because that is getting into a lot of biochemistry and a lot of biochemical pathways that I prefer not to directly talk about on the podcast because I would need to have my notes in front of me. But the data for looking at, okay, so great. We know that vitamin B6 is important for our liver to degrade oxalate, but like, does it actually work, right? Like when we actually give people supplemental vitamin B6, does it actually reduce urine oxalate, and does it actually prevent kidney stones? And honestly, the data is pretty sparse. There's not a lot it's really saying that it does or doesn't, except in the rare occasion of people who have a genetic disorder called primary hyperoxaluria type 1 or 2. There is good data to show that vitamin B6 is really important for them, which makes sense because this genetic disorder is basically causing people to produce massive amounts of oxalate in their urine. So it makes sense, massive amounts of oxalate in their liver, which ends up in their urine. So it makes sense that in this very rare genetic condition, vitamin B6 can prevent stones and certainly reduce urine oxalate levels. But when we look at sort of like the general population of people with kidney stones who don't have this rare genetic condition, there's really not good data to convince me that this is something that people with kidney stones should be forming or should be taking. I think there are times when people have very stubborn high urine oxalate, like we've kind of done everything we can realistically diet-wise, we're getting in enough calcium, we're avoiding those super, super high oxalate foods, and that urine oxalate is still is high, which is very rare, honestly. For most of the time, if people just get in enough calcium, we see urine oxalate come tumbling down, and we do not need to worry about how much oxalate people are eating. But in those rare times, there are a couple things that I do recommend in very specific situations, and vitamin B6 is one of them because there's a little bit of data, but I just don't think that most people really need to be taking it because generally we can get it down with just getting in enough calcium. But there's a little data to show that maybe it could help. And I do think, to your point, Jill, about will it cause harm, I think there's not a lot of harm when it comes to taking vitamin B6 specifically, except for cost, which we'll talk a little bit about in a second. I don't think that it's something that you really need to be taking. And especially, like, when you think about vitamin B6, it is a water-soluble vitamin. This pill has almost 450% of the amount of B6 that you need in one day. Spoiler alert, you also get vitamins and minerals in the food that you eat, and most people are getting plenty of vitamin B6 from just eating a healthy diet. So you're getting like a ton of this water-soluble vitamin, which means that you're just excreting it in your urine. So like you're really not, you're kind of just making really expensive urine, quite frankly. But again, in these rare conditions with pH1, or if you have super, super stubborn high urine oxalate, I think there may be a case for vitamin B6, but for most people, I don't think it's something that we need to be taking. This supplement also has 43% of the amount of magnesium that you should be taking, which may or may not be a good thing. I actually have a whole blog post about magnesium, and I'll definitely link to that in the show notes. The research behind magnesium and kidney stone magnesium supplementation and kidney stone prevention is sparse. There is, and I talk about it in the blog, so I'm not going to go into details, but just know that generally having a lot of or enough magnesium in your urine is a good thing for oxalate stone prevention specifically, because magnesium can bind to oxalate, which makes it unable to bind to calcium and form a kidney stone. So if you have low magnesium and we aren't able to get it up with food, then yeah, I think there is a time and a place for magnesium supplements, but is this something that every single person should be taking? Absolutely not. If you're eating a healthy, varied diet that includes lots of, ironically, the exact foods that we tend to limit on a low oxalate diet, magnesium comes in nuts and seeds and green leafy vegetables, then you probably are going to have enough magnesium. But there is definitely something there when it comes to magnesium and stone prevention. And so I think if you are deficient in magnesium, especially if you see low levels of magnesium in your urine, not just your blood, I think there could be potential for magnesium supplementation. But again, as this thing that everyone should be taking, I don't think that it needs to be done. So that third thing that's in there is potassium, so just 2% of your daily potassium. So a very, very small amount of potassium. In general, potassium is a really good thing for stone prevention, but of course, this supplement has such a little amount in there, I don't think it's really going to move the needle. So I feel like that's almost like not even a point when we talk about this. Also important to note, because of the specifically that magnesium and potassium that is in the supplement, in addition to those vitamins themselves, or vitamins and minerals themselves, it's also providing some citrate. And I talk a ton about citrate on this podcast and in my blog and everything. But a study that actually measured the exact amount of citrate that this specific pill was providing showed that one dose of TheraLith provided somewhere between 5 to 10 milliequivalents of citrate. So not a ton, just a small dose of that, which again may or may not be a good thing for you. Citrate can be a really powerful inhibitor of stones, but it really only matters if you're taking, if you have low levels of citrate in your urine, which a lot of people don't who are forming stones. So again, it really depends on your 24-hour urine test. And I think, that was a lot of information, but hopefully the take-home message really is, I really despise these recommendations or supplements that say like, hey, I'm good for kidney stones in general. Well, that is just silly when you think about how kidney stones form and how diverse kidney stones are, right? Like, there are obviously many different types of kidney stones. And even for the same type of stone, there are very, very different reasons that each of you may be forming kidney stones. And we really need to be looking at that urine test to see why you're forming stones, to know if this is going to be helpful whatsoever. I looked at, tried to find some research behind the specific supplement, this TheraLith supplement, and I found one study that was published back in 2006, so quite some time ago, because it is 2024 right now, and it randomized 5 patients to take this supplement, and of note, all of those patients had either low magnesium or low urine citrate. So yeah, these patients have low magnesium, they have low citrate, so as I'll share in a bit, we saw improvements. Their urine citrate went up, their urine magnesium went up. Not surprising, they were deficient. And unsurprisingly, this particular study also found that their calcium oxalate supersaturation went down, I imagine likely because of a result of that higher magnesium and higher citrate. So they found in this very small study of just 5 people that had low magnesium and citrate, that taking, surprise, surprise, magnesium and citrate, essentially supplements, helped it go up, and that helped improve their urine profile and helped reduce their risk of stones. But this is an incredibly small study. 5 patients is hardly, it's important to look at. All studies are important to look at, but like 5 patients is not very many. And they were, I imagine, sort of handpicked to see improvements with the specific supplement that they were providing them. So, there's really not, that's the only study I could find. So that's really the only, supporting evidence that I could find for this specific supplement. I also think whenever we are thinking about supplements in general, whether it's for kidney stones or otherwise, they can be insanely expensive, right? And generally, supplements, even outside of kidney stone world, don't have a lot of data to back them up. So this particular supplement actually isn't too bad. I did the math. I saw at least today on Amazon that it was about $75 for 360 tabs of this TheraLith supplement. The recommended dose is 2 of these per day. So if you do the math, that equates to about 42 cents per day. So that's not a lot, but that does add up, right? And if we know that this supplement really isn't doing that much for people, I would much prefer you spend that $75 on maybe more fruits and vegetables, maybe, spending it on Spindrift or something, or some beverage that we know is going to help you maybe drink more water and help prevent stones. Obviously everyone's financial situation is drastically different, and for some people 42 cents per day is nothing, but for others that could significantly cut into the thing that most comes to my mind as a dietitian, is their grocery bill and their ability to purchase fresh fruits and vegetables, perhaps maybe a higher quality meats that are going to have less sodium in them, and these types of things, right? So I think the cost is always something when we think about harm, when we're talking about cost benefit ratios and pros and cons of taking supplements. I think there is a real harm for some supplements. This one again isn't too expensive, but a real harm for some of these supplements truly displacing money from things that people need to purchase, whether it is groceries or obviously rent or maybe medications and these types of things. So just wanted to kind of throw that viewpoint out there. So, Jill, that was probably way more information than you wanted when you submitted this question, but I had to do a deep dive, as you know. So do I think that it's harming you, which is kind of the crux of your question? And I think probably not, right? I think that vitamin B6, if it may or may not help get that urine oxalate down, if your urine oxalate is high in the first place, but it's water soluble, you're just going to pee it out, so it's just making your urine really expensive. So that's probably not going to harm you. There's just 43%, so not even that much magnesium. Is that going to hurt you? Probably not. The only real harm, realistically, unless you're taking insanely high doses of magnesium, the only real harm of magnesium supplementation is diarrhea, which of course you lose water, which is not great for stone prevention, and diarrhea generally is not a good thing. But with this amount of magnesium, I really wouldn't expect to see that side effect. Potassium, that's such a little amount of potassium, like that's not even mentionable, honestly. So I guess unless you have if you have low kidney function, I think it's very important to be mindful of how much potassium you're taking. But most people with stones have normal kidney function. The one harm that I do potentially see is that citrate, because I do think that there is potential for harm for people who take citrate who don't necessarily need it. Citrate will raise urine citrate, which is generally a good thing, but it's also going to raise our urine pH, which for most people is a good thing. But if your urine pH is already high, that citrate is going to send it even higher. And that could get us into trouble when it comes to calcium phosphate stones. All that being said, there's just such a little amount of citrate in this product. I don't see that it's going to get people into too much trouble, but something to mention. Again, since I'm going into a deep dive, man, I tried to simplify my recommendations, and it still was long. There's just so much to consider, and I think the real take-home message is that we need to be looking at your urine test. We need to be really honing in on what is going to prevent stones for you. This particular supplement, I don't think is probably going to hurt you. Maybe there's a small potential for harm, but generally pretty low. And do I think it's going to help? Probably not. We really need to look at that urine test and see what supplements or dietary changes should be made for you to prevent stones. So, Jill, I hope that helps. It sounds like you've been taking the supplement for a really, really long time. I have no idea if this podcast is going to, have you stop it or think that you're going to continue it. Another thing to think about is if you've been taking the supplement, I think you said for 10 years, are you still forming stones? If so, probably a good sign that it's not really doing a lot of help for you. So with that, I will close this episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. As always, thank you for joining me. And if you have a question that you would like to be submitted like Jill did for a chance to get answered on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. As I always say, these are my very favorite types of episodes to record because I know that I'm actually answering questions that you have as my listeners. So if you just head to kidneystonepodcast.com, you can record a question again for a chance to get answered on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next Wednesday.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. For more help with kidney stones, check out my website, www.thekidneydietitian.org. For more personalized help from me, check out my online course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School. VIP enrollment includes help directly from me. I can't wait to see you there and help you prevent kidney stones. Have a great day.